Hello friends, so welcome to this lecture on Azure Disk Encryption. So like we discussed in the previous lectures, this is one of the control which you can have it on your virtual machine to secure it or harden it. So without wasting much time, let's try to understand about the Azure Disk Encryption. So before moving further, let's try to understand the need for disk encryption. Why should have a disk encryption? See, first of all, we all know that, okay, the data disk or the OS disk or the disk which is attached to your virtual machine that is used to store data, and that data might be having different uh, confidentiality levels, or you can say data classification levels. So depending on the value of data, there is a need to apply encryption onto that so that we can prevent the unauthorized access. So the first is it helps us to prevent the unauthorized access to the data which is stored onto your disk. And the another is like depending on the organization business, whether it's there are different standards or there are different compliance requirements which organization needs to comply with. So in that case, there is a need to meet those standards or compliance requirements if the organization needs to do a business. So in that case, that is the second requirement. So just to give you an example, if you'll talk about the PCI DSS, which is for the organization which process the customer credit card data. So the PCI DSS requirement 3 talks about the protect stored card holder data, like the data which is stored that should be protected. So in case you are putting some PCI data onto the virtual machines or you need to comply with those, so you must have a disk encryption. You should use this feature to encrypt the data which is stored onto your virtual machines or the servers which you'll be using. For Microsoft, Azure Disk Encryption makes sure that you confirm to and ensure all the safety and security are maintained along with maintaining the security of data. So what is Azure Disk Encryption? See, disk encryption is a kind of service in Azure that allows you to encrypt the data which is stored onto your virtual machines. That could be your Windows, or you could say that Linux IS virtual machines. So in case Windows, it uses BitLocker, and in case of Linux, you can use the DN-encrypt, which has all the features, and both are basically the existing industry standards which are used to encrypt the OS disk volumes and data volumes, which is there into your virtual machines. And Azure Disk Encryption, like we discussed, helps you to protect and safeguard your data to meet the organization security and compliance requirements. And it uses BitLocker for Windows and dmcrypt for the Linux. And you can also integrate it with the Azure Key Vault too, which basically helps you to control and manage the disk encryption keys and secrets. See, there are certain compliance requirements or standards which says that, okay, the keys which are used to encrypt the data, that should be managed, or that should be in the organization's custody and all those things, or that should be keys should be stored in the key vault. So there are features, or you can say with the help of Azure Disk Encryption, you can integrate it with the Key Vault to store those keys within the Azure Key Vault. And there are various protection elements like access control. Customer can control access to the key secrets which is stored in the Key Vault. And customer basically can collect logs in the storage account. It can help in doing the necessary monitoring and logging. Along with that, data security and availability is there, because the disks which are encrypted, or the disks in which the data is stored are automatically replicated by the Azure storage service, because they are stored in the, or the VHD files which are used are stored in the storage account. So you'll get the data security and that availability. So don't worry if you are not able to understand it now, how to integrate it with the Key Vault. You'll be able to understand with the in the demo lecture. So what are the networking requirements? So the first one is like to get a token, basically to connect to the Azure Key Vault. The Windows virtual machine or the virtual machine you'll be having should be able to connect to the Azure Active Directory endpoint. And now there is a need to write the encryption keys to the key vault, Windows or your virtual machine must be able to connect to the key vault endpoint. So you'll see that in a demo that okay, what are these requirements and how you can have a simple checkbox which you can enable and you can use these features. And the Windows VM must be able to connect to Azure storage account, because in the storage account your VHD files are stored or your data is stored, and that hosts the Azure extension or your and an Azure storage account that hosts basically your VHD files or your which is like a data disk, or you can say your virtual hard drive, like we do it in the typical virtual machines. So in case there are issues, you're not able to connect, and you can check for the Azure Key Vault firewall restrictions and diagnostics logs to check where where there is a problem and you're not able to connect. So this is it, friends. In this lecture, we discussed about the need for the disk encryption, and then Azure Disk Encryption overview, how you can have the boot volume and data volume and stored to the storage account and integrate to the key vault, and then the networking requirements for the Azure Disk Encryption. So this is it, friends, in this lecture. Thank you for watching this lecture.